Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with my October wrap-up as well as a quick little channel update. I have not been super active on Booktube for pretty much the past month, like all of October and the end of September. I got a mouth infection, which led to me getting my wisdom teeth removed, and I'm now about a week and a half past that. I'm mostly healed. There's still a little bit of discomfort, but I'm fine. I also got a job last week, so new job, yay! There will be a learning curve with that when it comes to my time management skills and all of that. But in essence, I am back. I should be more regular now, that I'm not in like constant pain in my mouth, that I'm not swollen in my face and don't feel like I can film. I will be posting a September wrap up. I haven't filmed it, I haven't like thought about doing it yet, but I definitely will. I just figured, hey, I could post my October wrap up on time and my September wrap up is gonna be way late anyway, so what's another few days? I did wind up reading 9 books during October, which was quite good. I got through 2 of my buddy reads as well as my rereadathon book, and I read 6 Karin Slaughter books. Normally I talk about my books in order, but because I don't want to just like force Karin Slaughter down your throats until you get to the variety I read, I'm gonna do all the Karin Slaughter books last and start with the other things I read. First, we have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I buddy read this with Kylie A and Abby McReads, both of whom will be linked down below. I don't have it with me, which is making things kind of difficult because I also haven't filmed a video since like the middle of September, so I've forgotten how to do wrap-ups and such, but The Goldfinch. It is an adult contemporary, possibly literary fiction, who knows what literary fiction really is, novel about a young boy whose mother is killed in a terrorist incident, and it pretty much covers his life and his devolution, as it were, into the world of art theft and con artistry. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed the first half. I found the second half tedious, and I think that was partially my fault because I am someone who prefers to read books in like single big chunks, and I wound up reading the first 400 pages of this book because it's rather thick before my wisdom teeth surgery, and then the last 400 pages after, so there was about a 2-week break in between, and I think that made me feel very disconnected from the book. But I loved the first half. It was so just like painfully slow and needlessly wordy, but in like the best way because I'm such a sucker for those kind of books. I can see why a lot of people hate it. I don't know if Kylie ever finished it or if she DNF'd it. Abby really loved it. I see why. The second half I found tedious, and I started getting irritated by the long passages of dialogue and the exposition in the dialogue and just the plot as a whole. I was more interested in like the dysfunctional family life of this child than I really was in like the world of art theft and the criminal underworld and that kind of thing. So just in general, I really enjoyed it, and I kind of wish I just read it all at once because I do think I would have enjoyed it more that way. But still, like, solid book, and I'm really excited to read more of Donna Tartt. The second book I read for the rereadathon on October 31st. I finished it at like 1:30 in the morning on November 1st, but still counts for this. That is A Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy. This is a contemporary middle-grade novel about a young girl with synesthesia who's dealing with grief over the death of her grandfather and kind of just figuring out what synesthesia is and figuring out who she is. It's a really heartwarming novel. It's just one of those that like is so lovely. Mango is the name of her cat, and there's a lot about like colors and what they mean to her since she has synesthesia. I gave this book 5 stars, and part of that is because of my nostalgia for it. Like I don't want to lie or like imply that I think it's an amazing, like the most amazing thing in the world. I think it's a really good book, but my nostalgia definitely pushes this over the edge because it's the emotions that make this book for me. I think it's written too fast. I think it's a little bit too simplistic, although it is middle grade, so you can't really hold that against it too much. But mostly it just feels very fast for what it is, and I wish it had been slowed down just a little bit. But I love it. Like, the emotions are there for me. I cry so hard. This book is one of the very few books that just makes me sob uncontrollably because it's just so sad. It's so sad, but like so happy, and I adore it. So 5 stars. I was very happy to reread it. I reread it every couple of years, and I probably will continue to do so. If you like contemporaries like this, definitely recommend. I've heard the synesthesia rep is not good, but that doesn't negate any of my positive feelings for this book. I love it. And the last non-Karin Slaughter book I read was Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I buddy read this with Crazy Book Lady, who I will link down below. I don't think either of us particularly enjoyed this one. She gave it 2 stars, I gave it 3 stars, and it just wasn't the book for either of us. This is a day in the life book. That's how it's described. It is a day in the life of Mrs. Dalloway and also like 18 other characters. And I was very interested in the Mrs. Dalloway part. If this book had just been a day in the life of Mrs. Dalloway, I would have really enjoyed that because the first 50 pages or so of this book I loved. I thought it was fascinating to see Mrs. Dalloway going about her day and like kind of just learning about like mundane society at the time and like what she was doing, what her days were like. But then it kind of devolved into all these other characters, some of whom were very important and we would come back to them again and again, and others who would just like show up for a little bit to show their opinions and then kind of leave. And it was very weird. I found it difficult to follow and very tedious and boring, and I kind of just like found myself wishing it was just about Mrs. Dalloway. It felt like this book had way too wide of a scope, just with all the people in it and with all the topics it was covering, that it didn't really interest me. It took me a few weeks to read, and I just never wanted to pick it up. I was never interested in it, and I do understand what some people get out of it, but it wasn't for me. I'll be doing a full review on this if I can like get my thoughts, because there were some elements I really appreciated, like insights into Mrs. Dalloway's character. There were some really beautiful writing moments, but it was just like overall, I don't know, I didn't really understand the point of this book. I didn't get why it had to exist, but it just, I don't know, I didn't particularly enjoy it. And then we get into my rather massive stack of Karin Slaughter books. I discovered Karin Slaughter this month. I was stressed, I was tired, my mouth hurt, and I didn't want to read anything that was like heavy or dense, so I was just binging a bunch of thrillers. I picked her up and decided I loved her and got a bunch of her books from the library. The first Karin Slaughter book I read was Triptych. This is the first in the Will Trent series. Triptych is like 3 stories that kind of connect or are intertwined in some way, and that's a really good way to describe this book. There are 3 sections in this, and each section follows a different person. The first is a cop, the second is a criminal who's just gotten out of prison, and the third is Will Trent. I gave this book 4 stars. It's about a serial killer who rapes and murders women, and they're trying to discover who this person is. I gave it 4 stars. I found it fascinating. I loved it. This was kind of the perfect Karin Slaughter book for me to start with, because there was a plot twist in this book that got me so hard, and I don't normally get got by plot twists. Like, I frequently see them coming, and even if I don't explicitly know what it is, it doesn't surprise me when I learn it. It's like, okay, that makes sense. This one made me angry in like a good way. I love when something just like comes out of nowhere and shocks me like that. But when you go back and check, because I went back and checked because I didn't see it coming that much, it was like, it was there. Like, there were some hints there. Like, it made sense within the context of the story. It was just so unexpected that it made me angry, and I loved it. It's hard to talk about like the specific plot in many of these books, just because A, I read so many of them that they do kind of run together, and B, in general, thriller plots don't stick with me that much, but I did give it 4 stars, and I really, really enjoyed it. The second Karin Slaughter book that I read was Fractured. This is the second in the Will Trent series, and I don't remember the plot for this at all. Okay, after reading the back of this, I can now tell you that a teenage girl is found murdered, and her mother comes home, kills the boy who murdered her, and the end. Only that's not the end, because it's a thriller, and then another girl goes missing, and it's kind of like this whole long convoluted thing. And I also gave this 4 stars. My not describing the plot doesn't mean that the plot is bad. It's just that I don't remember it, because I don't tend to remember thriller plots for more than like 2 or 3 days after. They don't stick with me, and I don't care if they don't stick with me, because I'm not reading a thriller book so that I think about it 2 months down the road. I'm reading it because it's really fun and entertaining while I'm reading it. This I really enjoyed, and this is kind of where I stop talking about the specific book so much and start talking about the Will Trent series, because there are elements in this series that I really enjoy and some that I don't. And start the ones I don't really care about Will Trent or many of the other like reoccurring characters. They're not bad, I just don't care about them. But what I really love is the discussion on adult literacy, because Will Trent is illiterate, functionally illiterate. He has some kind of severe dyslexia, I believe. It's undiagnosed, but in the book it's kind of implied that that's what it is. And he doesn't read well. He kind of slipped through the cracks and got away with like faking it his whole life so that he can read a little bit, but not very well and like not at all when he's really tired or sick or stressed, which, he's a cop working cases. That happens a lot. And I do think that's a very interesting discussion, and I appreciate that in these books. But yeah, this one was fun. This one was super entertaining, 4 stars. Then I read Cocktown, which is one of her standalone books. This is a historical fiction thriller set in the 1970s in Atlanta, Georgia, about 2 female cops who have joined the precinct, and they're hunting for a serial killer who's going after cops. I gave this 3 stars, and this was the only Karin Slaughter book that I gave 3 stars, and it's not that I thought this book was any worse than any of the other books that I've read by her. It's just that it wasn't to my taste as much. Because this is historical fiction and it's specifically about cops in the 70s, if you know anything about cops in the 70s, it's that they were really racist and sexist and homophobic and anti-Semitic and pretty much any prejudice you can come up with. That's what the cops in the 70s were like. And because of that, it was honestly kind of unpleasant at times. And I'm not blaming Karin Slaughter for that. She was capturing a time that was really prejudiced. So it makes sense that she would want her book to be really prejudiced because, like, it's realistic. It wasn't poorly done in any way. It just was not to my taste because when I'm reading thrillers, I don't want them to be unpleasant in that regard. Like, when it's a specific crime, that's fine with me. But when it's tackling, like, a larger social issue, I prefer reading about that in terms of like dramas or like literary fiction or contemporaries, like things like that. And I prefer my thrillers to be more on the lighter, fun side. So because this was very dark and very prejudiced, it just made it a little bit more unpleasant to read. And I didn't really care about the murders too much because this was very heavily focused on the time period. That was almost like half the story, and then the serial killer was the other half the story. And it just wasn't to my taste, but I think if you like that kind of thing, if that sounds interesting to you, that you would really enjoy this. And then I read The Good Daughter, which is the Karin Slaughter book that everyone talks about everywhere. This is the one everyone seems to love. I gave it 4 stars. This is about a woman who, when she was young, her mother and older sister were shot because her father was a very controversial lawyer in the small town. He took a lot of cases where people seemed to be obviously guilty and then got them off, so he and his family were pretty much hated. And now she is an adult and a lawyer who works with her father and kind of still dealing with the ramifications of what happened, 20 years ago. I gave this 4 stars, really enjoyed it, really thought it was wonderful. I do think I like her cop thrillers more than her kind of psychological thrillers, if that makes sense. This is more on like the cop side of things still, but I don't know, like, I really enjoyed this book. It was really fun while reading it, but I did predict the ending very early, which kind of bummed me out a little, but it was still really entertaining, really fun. Like, the only reason this sounds kind of negative is because of how much I loved all of her other books, and that even though this one was still 4 stars, still really great, still highly recommend it. I think of her books that I gave 4 stars, this is probably one of the lesser ones, but like, I usually rate thrillers around 3 stars, so this is still like definitely an above average thriller that I really enjoyed. And then I read Undone, which is the 3rd book in the Wolf Trent series. This follows Will Trent and his partner as they start investigating a serial killer who is killing women in pairs. And they all tend to be like really unpleasant women who tend to have eating disorders, and it's very interesting, it's very dark, it's very grisly. Karin Slaughter is kind of known for being grisly and trying to make the reader uncomfortable, which I like. I gave this book 4 stars. I think it's kind of forgettable. Like, I don't know. I know what it's about, I can tell you, but I can't really tell you anything specific apart from that I just enjoyed it. It was fun. I recommend the Will Trent series. And then the final book I read was Broken. This is the 4th book in the Will Trent series, and I loved this. I think of the Karin Slaughter books I've read, the top 2 were Triptych, which was the 1st in the Will Trent series, and this one. If you don't care about starting books in the middle of series, or like 2 series, because this kind of like combines 2 different series, I really recommend picking up this book because this book was probably the most fantastic of all of her books for me. And the reason I loved this so much, I gave it 4 stars. I forget if I mentioned that. The reason I loved it so much is because it captures different perspectives really well. Like, all of her books do that to some degree, but in this book, it really seems like the focus of the book is the fact that she's covering people who disagree with each other. She's covering people who have completely different perspectives on situations, and they all think they're right. And that was the thing that kept hitting me during this book, was that people don't normally do things that they think are wrong unless they think it's like a wrong thing, but the ends justify the means in that kind of way. And in this, you have some people who think this kid who was arrested is completely innocent of the crime, who thinks the cops are manipulative and corrupt and terrible and just wants to take them down and get revenge. And then you have other people who think this kid was guilty, this kid committed murder and possibly rape. This kid was a terrible person. Maybe the cops didn't do everything by the book, but they did it for the right reasons and they were right. And it's just fascinating to read perspectives from characters who aren't evil, who aren't like meant to be like the bad guy. They're just another character who just completely disagree on like basic moral things. And it was fascinating. Like it this was the standout book. And I'm not just saying that because it was the last one, because I did finish those other 3 books after reading this book. It was just the one that really hit me the hardest and the one that was probably the most memorable. Apart from Cocktown and The Good Daughter, who were just like very, very different. So those were all 9 books that I read in the month of October. October was kind of a weird month, and I'm hoping November is a bit more like up to par for like what I normally am and how I normally exist as a person, because the last month has just been like weird and intense and a lot, and I'm so glad that it's over and I'm just like, my mouth is fine, everything is fine, I have a new job. Now I can function and do booktube like I used to. I also moved, I've mentioned this several times, I moved in the summer and I'm in a new location. This is the first time I've like filmed at my boyfriend's place, so it's weird. I don't really know much about this filming setup. I'm not sure it's gonna work, but it was gonna work enough for this video, so there will probably be a lot of tweaking in terms of the lighting and the setup and the background and everything as I get used to filming here, but for now, this is what we've got, so we're dealing with it. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them if you have, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.